we will all go through coping with the cutback of services that we're going to get. It's going to be particularly hard on the academic community, because the cuts there are going to be heavy. I refer not only to the students who are going to be cut back in the services they get, the teachers they have, the classroom size they live with, and so on, but I'm talking about a further savaging of the ranks of academics. For those of you that are not familiar, we have had a sea change in American higher education, in which what was a majority of faculty hired for long-term contracts, eventually given tenure so they could stay in an institution with relative freedom, that has been replaced by a virtual army of what are called adjuncts. People who do not have long-term contracts, who teach 1 or 2 courses, are paid enormously less money than the full professors and assistant professors used to get paid. There's going to be much more of that. There was a story the other day about a huge number of classrooms in Florida that have done away with teachers altogether. It is the classroom in which the students arrive, sit for 50 minutes, staring at a computer screen with someone lecturing at them. Since this is even cheaper than an adjunct, there will be more and more of this kind of activity. The job opportunities for people going, I know this will come as a shock to some of you, and I don't mean to upset you. On the other hand, you didn't come here for sugarcoating. You could have stayed home and watched TV and gotten that. The job future for people going to graduate school in this country is a disaster. And we can already see the signs. I gave a talk not too long ago at Yale University to the economics department, and I walked into the room, and every face I saw, every face, there must have been 40 people in the room, graduate students, every face was a face that either by its color or its features were clearly not American, at least in the sense that I took it, except for a small group of 3 or 4 in the corner. And so as I gave my presentation about the economics of the concept of efficiency, efficiency in economics is a concept that is akin to the debate in the religious community years ago about how many angels can dance on the head of a pin. Efficiency is a concept that has the logical status of that question. How many angels can, how efficient is something? Only people in the future will look back on the profession and realize that when they came to become devotees of efficiency is when it really hit rock bottom. Can't get dumber than that. But in any case, I digress. In the future of the academic profession at this point is a disaster. When I finished my talk at Yale, I said, I'm interested, could you explain to me? I see nobody who looks like an American citizen, at least of the normal white variety. And there were no African Americans in the room that I recall. I said, except for you. And they all giggled and explained to me that they were Canadian. There was not a single U.S. student in the room. And they told me that there were only 4 U.S. students out of a community of about 85 graduate students in residence at Yale at that time. Everybody comes from someplace else, will get their graduate education, and go someplace else. But if the American young people have already figured this out, and they're not going to graduate school, there's really no point. It's over. And that's a part, again, of this bifurcation of a society in which a small number will get that education, and more are having to fall by the wayside. There is a savaging of the educational opportunity, which functioned in our society as an institution to allow people from one socioeconomic framework to find a way into another one. And to close that avenue off says something about both the society now and where it is going. So there are basic things going on that are flowing out of the savage conditions of federal, state, and local governments faced with their way forward in the crisis. In other countries, when governments cut back, either by raising taxes or laying off workers or cutting programs, it has a name. In Europe, the name is austerity. Everywhere in Europe, this program is a program of austerity. Each country in Europe has that, its version in its own language. Austérité in France. It's the issue. And everywhere in Europe it is being fought bitterly by an alliance of the trade unions, socialist, communist parties, and other left parties. Green Party in some countries where it's a left party, not in other countries where the Greens have become a more rightist party. They're more left in France, they're more right in Germany, for example. It varies. But these left parties are fighting. That's the #1 issue. The fight against austerity. Greece, 7 general strikes. 7 in 2010 against austerity. Italy, 4. France, 1. But a doozy. And street battles in Ireland, in Dublin, in London, where the young people, students, leading because of the cuts being proposed by the Cameron government, like here, to higher education. The students took the, and had pitched battles with the police in London. Tens of thousands of students, just a few months ago. Portugal, Spain, all the countries of Europe, more or less. A little less in the central and northern parts of Europe, much more in the what they call the peripheral countries around the edge. A massive fight. That's the defining issue on the left right now. If the left prevails in the elections coming up over the next year or two, particularly those in Germany and France, because those are the 2 mega economies within Europe, then the whole political future of Europe, and therefore of politics in this country too, will be different. So this is a struggle to watch. In the United States, there is no comparable struggle. There just isn't. We haven't had general strikes. We haven't had any kind of strikes at all. We had a little bit of an action last year, early in the year, by college students in California. Very courageous, very interesting. But it has quieted down, and from what I understand, they're having trouble sustaining the organizations that were formed among the students in the college system. But with the new cuts being proposed, it may rev up again, and they're hopeful that they will be able to do it. But other than that, nothing. So what is going on here in the United States? Well, one answer obviously is that the cutbacks haven't yet bitten hard enough to rev people up. I don't know what to say about such an argument. There have already been profound cutbacks. What I read to you when we began tonight should be enough to scare any reasonable person, both in those communities and in all the others like that. So I'm not going to pursue that. I don't know where that would take. So what might it be? Well, clearly one part of the answer for sure is that we don't have the organizations that the Europeans have. If you watch, if you go, if you inquire about the movements in Italy or Spain or France or anywhere else, you'll see the traditional organizations of the working class mobilizing their apparatuses. The trade unions, the Communist Party, the Socialist Party, the anti-capitalist parties, and that's a growing phenomenon in Europe. They mobilize their people. They have networks, they have worked together, they have institutions, they have offices across the country in every city. They have an infrastructure that can mobilize people. And we don't. Our Communist Party barely exists. Our Socialist Party barely exists. Whatever heroes and heroines are in them is a different matter. The rest of our left is dispersed, demoralized, committed to doing things other than mass organization for all kinds of reasons, and we don't have the networks. So part of the explanation for the absence of our response is, for sure, in my judgment, we don't have those institutions. We had them in the 1930s, which goes a long way to understanding why we had a federal employment program in the 1930s. Because we had a powerful socialist party, a powerful communist party, and a powerful trade union movement led by a CIO that was signing up millions of workers every year for several years. That was a very different time. We had the organizations, and we could force a democratic governor and president to do things that nobody forces anyone to do now. So whatever else you may think of the last 50 years of American history, as the unions and the left political parties were shrank, beaten, defeated, repressed, whatever you want to call it, one of the consequences is there's no one to force even the most liberally kind of reforms in this situation. We can't even get an employment program. I'm not talking about socialism, I'm talking about jobs for people without anyone attacking any private enterprise. We can't even get the reforms because we don't have something organized on the left to make that happen. So whatever people think about crushing the revolutionary left, one of the victims of the absence of a revolutionary left is a much less revolutionary left that can't get its reforms through, even though they are much less than what any revolutionary would request or demand. So what is it then in the United States? What else besides hasn't bitten hard enough and we don't have organizations? I would submit, and this is the thing I want to close with, that we have a concept of the economics of cities and towns that makes us complicit, even those of us on the left, with what's unfolding. However much we may shake our heads when someone summarizes what the horrible effects of all this will be, as I've tried to do. What is that concept? Well, the concept is that somehow our cities and states have to. I hear this all the time. I mean, they don't have the money. Well, what are you going to do? They just don't have the money. So either they have to get the money by taxes, right? Or they have to stop doing things because they just don't have the money. And with the arms spread wide, you are appealed to not be a nutcase who wants them to do stuff for which they don't have the money. So I want to conclude by talking about the money. Where's the money? Where could the states and the cities get the money? What's the money situation? So I'll try to be brief. Because this is partly an emergency now, that we've discussed, but it's also been going on a long time. There are three basic groups of people who provide money to the government. There's the mass of people. Then there's the rich people, right? The top 10%, more or less. And then there's corporations. And the government taxes the average person, and it taxes the rich, and it taxes corporations. I'm going to use New York as an example, just because we're in New York. I don't mean to pick on New York, pleasurable though that is. So what does New York rely on? New York State, not the city. The city is different from the state. New York State relies on an income tax. Those of you who live here have noticed this. And it's a progressive income tax. The rate goes up, but not by a lot, for those who are very rich. It's a little higher than for those who aren't. But the gap between those at the bottom and those at the top is single digits, not very much. But it's the largest single source of revenue for the state of New York. It's a broad-based tax that hits everybody, individuals, and a little more if you're richer. So it incorporates the concept, this is important to keep in mind, that those who have more should pay more. The tax is based on the principle, the more you have, the higher the percentage of your income you should be required to pay. Same principle that governs the federal income tax. The second source of revenue is a broad-based tax. The sales tax is the major part here in New York. That is not progressive. It's very important to understand. It is regressive. What does that mean? Not only does it not tax you more according to your ability to pay, it actually taxes you less the more you have. A sales tax